Hello students, welcome to La Excellence IAS KALAM program Season 2 Episode 6. This is a GS Mains answer writing series. I am Kiranmai and I will be presenting the Season 2 of this series. It will last around 50 episodes. Let us see today's question. The question says, critically analyze the present electoral system in India and suggest possible reforms to bring about fairness, accountability and transparency. This question is from GS paper 2 from the polity section and from the subtopic of electoral reforms. Okay, this question is carrying 10 marks and we have to write the answer in 150 words. This question has got two subparts. The first part is asking about critical analysis. Okay, it is asking about critical analysis of the present electoral system. Okay, and the second part is asking us to suggest some reforms. Okay, it is asking us to suggest reforms to bring about fairness in the election process, that is free and fair elections. So the question is divided into two parts. Let us see the context why this question is being asked. Elections happen in India every year in one state or another state. Okay, also general elections had happened just last year to the Lok Sabha. So this topic is important for the UPSC exam. Apart from that, the Election Commission of India has been multiple times in news and it has been criticized for not enforcing the model code of conduct in spirit in many elections, especially the last year's Lok Sabha election. It was criticized, and even the recent Delhi elections, it has been criticized for not enforcing the model code of conduct. So the first context is criticism of Election Commission of India. Okay, and next there has been demand for simultaneous elections. Okay, what are these simultaneous elections? Simultaneous elections to both Lok Sabha and state assemblies at one juncture, at one point of time. That is, it is spread over a period of few days, but all in 1 year over a period of 2 or 3 months. So why does this demand occur? Okay, because whenever there is an election process, the governance gets affected. It gets paralyzed. Okay, the activities get paralyzed and the political activity or promotional activity takes a precedence over the governance and development aspects. Because of this, there has been a demand for simultaneous elections. Okay, so that complete 5 years, the government can focus on developmental aspects rather than on the elections. And third, electoral bonds were in news. What are these electoral bonds? These were brought in so as to ensure that there is no presence of black money in the electoral funding. Okay, but these have been under criticism because they are still criticized to be non-transparent. Election Commission itself has raised that these bonds will be non-transparent. Okay, this is one reason why electoral processes have been in news. And one more context is doubts regarding electronic voting machines. Okay, there have been many doubts regarding whether electronic voting machines function properly or not. Also, VVPATs have been introduced. Voter verifiable paper audit trials. Okay, so these have been in the news. I think you all must be aware of all these contexts in which this question is being asked. Let us now see at the prerequisites required to answer this question. One needs to know what are the constitutional provisions with respect to electoral process in India, and one also needs to know the acts or laws made by the Parliament with respect to conduct of free and fair elections. Apart from that, one also needs to know a little bit about the model code of conduct. Does it have a legal backing or not? How has it evolved? Is the code evolved by Election Commission of India, or is it by the consensus of political parties? So this is one prerequisite that you need to know. And next, you also need to know the issues that are associated with elections. Okay, what are the issues with the electoral process? For example, there is issue of black money entering the electoral funding, criminalization of politics, expenditures being too high. Okay, so there are many issues with respect to elections. All these issues one needs to have an idea. Okay, and then one also needs to know the Supreme Court judgments with respect to disqualifications of contestant, or the requirements a contestant has to furnish so as to contest. Okay, for example, recently Supreme Court has asked the parties to declare why a candidate has been chosen despite having a criminal background. Okay, so political parties are choosing candidates just because of their winnability, and Supreme Court has said that winnability cannot be the only criteria for choice of a candidate with a criminal background. So such judgments one needs to be aware of before attempting the answer. And then some of the committee recommendations. See, Dinesh Goswami committee has been formed for electoral reforms in 1990s. Okay, what are the findings of those, or what are the recommendations of those committees? Some of the recommendations of second ARC committee, recommendations of National Commission for Review of Working of the Constitution. So all these will be required to answer this question. For example, some recommendations which I can remember is second ARC has recommended for partial funding of the electoral process by the state, and with respect to coalition politics, it said that post-poll realignment coalitions will have to seek a fresh mandate. Okay, and it also called for an independent process, or to make the election commissioner's office more independent by appointment process involving a collegium. Okay, so all these measures were suggested by second ARC regarding electoral reform. So you need to know the committee's recommendations regarding electoral reforms to write a good value added answer. Let us now see how to write the answer to this question. So before going to the introduction, body and conclusion format, I want you to understand the question. It is asking us about the critical analysis of the electoral system. What constitutes critical analysis? So critical analysis means giving the good points about the present system and writing about the issues associated with the present system and suggesting the measures for the same. But the measures here in this question are asked in the second part. So we can limit ourselves in the critical analysis part to writing about the positives and negatives of the present electoral system. Okay, with that in mind, let us go ahead on to how to write the answer. The answer will be consisting of three parts: introduction, body and conclusion. So what are we going to write in the introduction? We can just say the importance of electoral system in India. For example, we can write that India is the world's largest democracy. Okay, so we are writing here the importance of electoral system in India. And here we can mention of that India is the world's largest democracy and elections happen on a regular basis in India, and hence transparency in the electoral system is quite important, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you can also mention the articles or laws which define or which describe about the electoral process in India. Okay, so the second way of writing the introduction is mentioning the various provisions in the constitution as well as in various laws. Okay, various provisions in the constitution can be written or various laws can be written. That is, these are the two ways I can think of for writing the introduction. Okay, these two will be the good ways. Let us see how to write the body. The body will be written in two parts. Firstly, we will be writing about the critical analysis, and as I have already discussed, we will be writing the positives as well as the negatives. So positives, for example, we have given universal adult franchise. Okay, and we have an election commission of India to conduct free and fair elections. So such good points we can tell in the positives. Okay, that is one part. And in the second part, we will be telling the issues associated with the election process in India. We have already discussed majority of the issues. So those we can write in the first part of the answer, that is the critical analysis part. And in the second part, we will be suggesting measures. And here comes the use of all the committee's recommendations which I have told. Not only committee's recommendations, even the Supreme Court judgments can be written here, that Supreme Court has suggested so and so this can bring about more electoral transparency, or Dinesh Goswami committee has recommended so and so on. Okay, so the body part should consist of two parts. First part the critical analysis part, and second part the measures part or the reforms part. Okay, and coming to the conclusion, here we can tell about the importance of electoral process. If you have written it in the introduction, this has to be different from the introduction. Okay, importance of electoral process has to be written in the conclusion. Why? Because in a democracy, electoral process is very important for upholding the values of democracy. So our conclusion has to be optimistic. I always insist on writing an optimistic conclusion, though we describe in our answer about the issues pertaining to the electoral process, our conclusion has always got to reflect optimism in it. Let us now see a sample answer for this question. So he writes, India has first passed the post system for elections to Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, and proportional representation system for presidential elections and elections to Rajya Sabha, etc. So here he is mentioning about the types of electoral processes. Okay, types of electoral processes. Then he goes on writing Articles 324 to 329 of Indian Constitution and laws made by Parliament like Representation of People Act 1950 and 1951 etc. deal with electoral system of the country. Here he is mentioning about the provisions that are there in the Constitution as well as in the laws that are made by the Parliament. Okay, he is telling what all provisions we have got to deal with electoral system in the country. If we observe, we see that he has written 2 paragraphs in the introduction. This is a lengthy introduction. Okay, now if we have to critically analyze, I told you that we have to write some good points. So he has given some provisions of these laws. Okay, he has written some provisions of these laws are Independent Election Commission, Article 324. He is trying to use his knowledge of Election Commission's article. So Independent Election Commission for free and fair election, universal adult franchise we have discussed, non-discrimination of voters, etc. So here he is telling about the positives. And then he is writing issues with the electoral process in India. So this is the second part of the critical analysis, that is the negatives of electoral process. What are the issues? Doubts on credibility of Election Commission is one issue he has written. And next, let us see what he writes. He has written criminalization of politics. Okay, criminalization also we have discussed. Role of black money in elections. Paid news. Paid news is also one of the important issues that is haunting India's current electoral processes. Okay, so he has mentioned few issues. That is, he has mentioned the negatives. So this here he is ending the critical analysis. What has he written further? Measures for measures for ensuring free and fair elections. In that, he first writes measures that are already taken. What are the measures already taken? Electoral bonds. We have discussed about the electoral bonds to prevent black money. Model Code of Conduct. Voter verifiable paper audit trial. Supreme Court orders on declaration of assets and criminal cases of contestants. So he is just mentioning all these in very short points. Okay, they are not even points. You can just say that he is just trying to use the keywords. Why is he doing so? Because of paucity of space that he has got. See, this is a 10 marks question and we have to write it within 150 words. In that scenario, you cannot write lengthy sentences. If you write lengthy sentences, you cannot put in much information and you will have to content yourself with 1 or 2 statements. But here he is trying to make the answer information dense by limiting his words to only the keywords. Okay, and then he goes on writing measures further needed. what are the measures that he is suggesting is written in this part. Let us see what he has written. He writes, wider interpretation of powers of Election Commission under Article 324 as suggested by Supreme Court. Okay, so he says that Supreme Court has suggested wider interpretation of powers of Election Commission, and he is asking us to implement those measures. And then he is writing, making electoral bonds truly transparent, making paid news an electoral offence, state funding of elections, etc. Okay, he is trying to address some of the issues that he has mentioned above. State funding of elections is a new issue. Okay, so here I think he is ending the body part. Let us see what he writes further. Free and fair elections are fundamental to safeguarding the values of democracy, and hence electoral reforms are needed to ensure transparency and uphold these values. So here he is telling the importance of electoral system in a democracy. Importance of electoral system in a democracy, and it is an optimistic conclusion and a short conclusion. Okay, so let us analyze the answer as a whole. He has written a lengthy introduction. He has written valid points, but these are quite a bit lengthy. Okay, see, because these are becoming lengthy, he had restricted space for critical analysis, and he had to write just the keywords, and then he had limited space for the measures taken also, measures suggested also. Okay, so you need to assess how much space you have to occupy for each of the subparts before writing the answer. Okay, even all the subparts have to be addressed in equal proportions. Only then, because each subpart carries equal marks. For example, if this is a 10-mark question, the first part will carry 5 marks and the second part will carry 5 marks. There is no exception to this rule, and hence try to make sure that you write both the parts in equal amount. Okay, so this is a good answer. He's trying to he's made a very dense answer. His conclusion is good, his introduction is good, but a bit lengthy. His body part is also very good. He could have added more points, especially in the measures that are further needed. Here, he could have written committee's recommendations, or ARC recommendations, or NCRWC recommendations. Okay, so he could have added committee reports to give value addition. Nevertheless, he had given some valid points, like the Article 324 he has mentioned. Then he has mentioned about Representation of People Act, and what are the articles that deal with election process in the country. So these are some valid points. He could have given more points. However, this is a very good answer. Now we are coming to the end of the discussion. We have discussed about how to approach this question, about the prerequisites, about the context, and also we have discussed a sample answer. We will be meeting again tomorrow. Thank you. Take care, stay safe, and stay indoors.